All right, today we're going to be tearing apart and rebuilding a Kawasaki KX80 motorcycle. This is a two-stroke, and we're going to start by pulling the head here. And we've got 12mm bolts on top. We've loosened them. Going back together, you want to make sure that they're torqued down evenly in a crisscross pattern there. So to remove it, there's a little point here where you can do a little bit of prying. You don't want to do much, as the aluminum, you don't want to damage that spot there. There's your head there. You want to inspect that, make sure the dome's good. And that head looks like it's in good condition. Next, we're going to pull the cylinder off and the piston. And there are 12mm bolts down here at the base. This is called your head gasket here. We've got your base gasket below the cylinder. So we'll pull this hose off, 2 hose clamps to pull that off. And we've also got your reed valve here. And we'll actually do that reed valve assembly now, just to get it out of the way. And they've got 4 8mm bolts holding this on. These boots have a tendency to weather and crack, which is what's going on here. It doesn't look like it's all the way through on this one, but you can see some weathering going on. And then you've got your reed valve here. We've got the pedals. You want to make sure that those are closing properly. Make sure there's no chunks missing, so that intake is how it's supposed to be. So now we've got 12mm bolts around 4 of those around the base of the cylinder. And you want to make sure that these are torqued going back together. And we've got your piston down in there. Remove these 4, and then we'll go on and do the clutch. Pull the clutch assembly apart, and then we will do the stator and the flywheel. We're not sure why this motor was brought in. We think that it was probably locked up on the cylinder. We'll see that here in a little bit. If it is locked up, we are not. Maybe a challenge to get it apart, but we'll see here. 8mm bolts all the way around your stator cover here. Also your chain guard, common issue for that chain to break. Come in here and break this cover up. Occasionally crack a case. If that's the case, then it will need replaced. So we've got the base bolts off of there. And this, you want to be awful careful again that you pry in the right spots. You want to make sure you don't get in an area that's going to damage that cylinder. And you got it popped off there. Once you get it started, a lot of times you can work it off as long as the cylinder isn't locked up in the piston. Looks like that's free, so we're able just to pull that off of there. Clean up your gasket here. Again, this is your base gasket. Make sure that's in good condition. Inspect your cylinder walls. Make sure there's no grooving or pitting. Make sure it's round. We've got some minor scoring there, which it may have just been brought in to be rebuilt. So there's your cylinder, and then there's your piston there. All right, we will, well, let's go ahead and remove that piston pin. What I do with these is grab a small screwdriver. I'll turn this here so you can see it, and go in and remove this circlip. So find that groove, stick your screwdriver back in behind there, and then just kind of pry that out. And I keep my thumb over top of it, that way it doesn't go flying. We got it out there. Sometimes they're supposed to be, if everything's in good condition, it's supposed to just be able to push it out like that. Sometimes it takes a little more force. So there's your piston. It's an oversized piston. Putting the piston and circlip back in. Also your bearing here, don't forget that. You inspect that really good. You want to replace those, they're cheap, may as well replace them. Your circlip here, what I do is, obviously on the crank with the bearing going through, put one side in, the open side in first. Push it into the groove as hard as you can. And then grab a screwdriver in that same hole there and kind of just pry it in there. And it'll just clip right in. So that's putting the piston back on. Now we'll go, let's remove that stator first. So we've got 8mm bolts all the way around that. and then to hold this shifter on, which we may not have to move yet, but we will. Going back together, you want to make sure you don't over tighten these bolts like this last guy did. This is a plastic cover, so they'll just sink right down into that cover. This damage isn't terrible, but obviously it's just going to shorten the life of that cover. You keep doing that, it's just going to continue to break. So cover's off. There's your flywheel there. And it looks like we've got a 14 millimeter to pull off this piece here. And I'm not totally sure. Here's your gasket here we'll pull off. Obviously replace that. And generally we have threads in here to pull this, but I'm not sure how this style is. Make sure you don't damage your case when you do this. We're going to go ahead and leave that for now. Crank turns over, but it is a little tough. We're going to pull this clutch cover. I'll grab up a block here so you guys are able to see what's going on. Well, we'll just do it like that. It looks like it's got a lot of oil and fuel on the bottom side here. I'm just going to tip it like that. Well, I'll just tip it upside down. We'll let that oil drain out. That way you guys can see it there. So we're going to pull your Kickstarter assembly off first. And that takes an Allen. Go with a 4 millimeter Allen. And then same thing, we've got 8 millimeter bolts all the way around there. Just gonna work it off there. It's splined. You wanna make sure the splines are in good condition. And this one's obviously broke, so we're gonna throw that one. Water pump is here, 3 8 millimeter bolts to pull that off. And the water pump cover is off. Got an impeller inside there with an 8 millimeter. And your impeller is off there. A lot of times it's pretty common for those to leak. That shaft that runs through there spins, pushing water through, and that'll just wear out. So that's a pretty common problem, is to replace that water pump seal there. Now I've got a handful of 8 millimeter bolts. All right, we've got 8 bolts there, and that's not including the water pump bolts. And this cover. What I like to do is get this clutch arm here. We can just, a lot of times, just pull that, and a lot of times they'll just slide right off of there. All right, there's your clutch assembly there. Everything looks extremely dirty, but it's got a lot of fuel and gas. It smells like fuel bad with the gas in there. That's just a... It'll all clean up really well. So we're gonna do the clutch next. We've got 8 millimeter bolts to remove those. block underneath here so you're able to see what we're doing. We've got 5 8mm bolts to remove this clutch pack. And these are spring loaded. So the last 2 kind of do work back and forth there so it doesn't break a post off. And then just lift that off like that. So what I'll do then, set this back on there, tighten this down, then you can pull that clutch pack out and inspect the basket really well. These you don't have to tighten down at this point, but I like to just get them all started. And then what you can do is just pull that, oh, this basket's broken here. So we can just pull that pack out then. You see our basket is broken, we've got a tab there. So this basket is junk at this point. Steel and friction plates still might be good. We'll go through and inspect those. Got kickstarter gear, a shift mechanism here. You've got a crank gear and your water pump gear set there. So we'll go ahead and pull a couple circlips here, a couple snap rings here. And then also we'll pull kickstarter gear, or the arm here. And that's spring loaded, so just be careful. And then we should be able to just pull that kickstarter out of there. You can do it without loosening this arm here. You just pry this kickstarter assembly back, get it past this piece here, pull up. But I think this may, yeah, this gear will hit it, so you'll be able to take the tension off, but you won't be able to pull that gear all the way out, the kickstarter gear all the way out. Grab some snap ring pliers, pull these off. You got one there, one there. These gears will just slide right off. This is a 2-piece gear, small one behind it. We've got your shift star here that's held on with a 12mm bolt here, and we've got an arm here with a roller, 8mm to pull that off. That's spring loaded as well, just make sure your pieces don't go flying. We'll have to remove the shifter from the other side to pull that shaft through, but right now we will just pull this star bolt here. Get that removed. And that star will just pop up there, but I don't think it will with this shift assembly still on. So we'll go ahead and flip this motor back over, work on pulling that flywheel and the stator.